Grandpa Henry was not your typical grandfather. He wasn't the kind of man who told funny stories at family gatherings or laughed loudly while playing games with his grandchildren. Instead, he was quiet, so quiet that sometimes people forgot he was in the room. But despite his silence, there was something about him that made everyone feel safe. Maybe it was the way he always seemed to know what you needed before you even said it. Or maybe it was the calmness in his eyes, which looked like they had seen more than most people could imagine. Henry lived in a small town nestled between rolling hills and vast fields of golden wheat. The town itself wasn't much. Just a few shops, a church, and rows of houses where families had lived for generations. Everyone knew each other and everyone had a story to tell. Except for Grandpa Henry. He didn't share his stories. When someone asked him about his childhood or what he did when he was younger, he would simply smile faintly, nod, and change the subject. It was almost as if he carried secrets too heavy to speak aloud. The kids in the family loved Grandpa, but they also found him puzzling. They often whispered among themselves, trying to figure out why he never talked about his past. Maybe he was a spy, one of the older cousins once joked during a summer barbecue. The idea made them all laugh, though deep down, none of them really believed it. After all, how could their gentle, soft-spoken grandfather have been involved in anything exciting? To them, he was just Grandpa, a man who grew vegetables in his backyard, fixed broken toys with surprising skill, and let them sit on his porch swing for hours without saying a word. But there were moments when Grandpa's mysterious nature became impossible to ignore. Like the time Emily, his youngest granddaughter, stumbled upon an old photograph tucked inside a dusty bookshelf. In the picture, Grandpa looked completely different. Younger, yes, but also sharper, wearing a suit that didn't match the casual clothes he wore now. There was a woman standing next to him, her arm linked with his, smiling brightly. Emily had never seen this woman before. When she showed the photo to her mom shrugged and said, "Oh, that must be from long ago. Your grandpa traveled a bit when he was young." But the explanation felt incomplete, leaving Emily with more questions than answers. Then there were the little things, the way Grandpa's hands moved when he worked on puzzles, steady and precise, as if he'd spent years training them, or the foreign phrases he muttered under his breath when he thought no one was listening. Once during a power outage, he lit candles and arranged them around the living room in a pattern that looked almost ceremonial. When Emily asked him about it, he chuckled softly and said, "Old habits die hard," before blowing out the lights and sending everyone to bed. Despite these oddities, Grandpa remained a beloved figure in the family. His presence brought a sense of stability, even if it came wrapped in mystery. People trusted him instinctively, knowing that whatever he kept hidden, it wasn't meant to harm anyone. Still, there was an unspoken understanding that certain topics were off limits. Asking Grandpa about his past was like poking at a sleeping bear, not dangerous exactly, but definitely risky. As the years went by, the family grew accustomed to Grandpa's quiet ways. Life moved forward, as it always does, filled with birthdays, holidays, and ordinary days that blurred together. The children grew up, some moving away for college or jobs, while others stayed close to home. Through it all, Grandpa remained a constant, a silent observer watching over them from his cozy house at the edge of town. And then, one crisp autumn morning, everything changed. Robert, Grandpa's eldest son, received a phone call from the hospital. Grandpa Henry had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news hit the family hard, though it wasn't entirely unexpected. At 92 years old, Grandpa had lived a long and full life. Still, losing him left a void that no one quite knew how to fill. In the days that followed, the family came together to plan the funeral. Robert took charge, working alongside his wife Margaret to ensure everything was done properly. They chose a simple wooden coffin, polished to a warm shine, and picked out Grandpa's favorite suit for him to wear. The undertaker assured them that everything was in order, though he mentioned one unusual detail. Grandpa's will specifically stated that no one was allowed to view the body before burial. This request puzzled the family, but they decided to respect it. assuming it was just another quirk of their enigmatic patriarch. As the day of the funeral approached, the town prepared to say goodbye to one of its oldest residents. Neighbors brought casseroles and baked goods to the family home, offering condolences and sharing memories of Grandpa. Some spoke of his kindness, recalling how he had helped fix fences or lent tools without expecting anything in return. Others remembered his wisdom, how he seemed to know exactly what to say or not say when someone was struggling. Though he hadn't spoken much, his actions had spoken volumes. For Emily, however, the days leading up to the funeral felt heavier than usual. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was still so much she didn't know about her grandfather. Every time she passed by the old photograph she'd found years ago, she wondered about the woman in it and the life Grandpa might have led before settling into the quiet routine everyone knew. Was it possible that the man they called Grandpa had been someone else entirely? Someone braver, bolder, and far more complex than anyone realized? Little did Emily, or anyone else, know. The answers to those questions were closer than they imagined. Hidden beneath layers of silence and secrecy, Grandpa's true story waited patiently, ready to emerge in a way that would leave the entire family stunned. But for now, all they could do was grieve, honor his memory, and prepare to lay him to rest, unaware that the greatest revelation was yet to come. The days following Grandpa Henry's passing were a blur of activity for the family. Everyone pitched in to make sure everything was ready for the funeral, but it was Robert, Grandpa's eldest son, who took on most of the responsibility. As the oldest child, he felt it was his duty to ensure that his father's final wishes were carried out properly. Margaret, Robert's wife, stood by his side, helping with decisions big and small. Together, they worked tirelessly to create a service that would honor the man who had meant so much to everyone. Choosing a coffin wasn't an easy task. The family wanted something simple, yet dignified, just like Grandpa himself. After visiting several shops, they settled on a polished wooden casket with warm tones that reminded them of the furniture Grandpa used to build in his workshop. Its design was understated, without any elaborate carvings or decorations, perfectly reflecting the quiet humility he had always embodied. When the coffin was delivered to the undertaker's office, Robert inspected it carefully, running his fingers over the smooth surface. It felt right somehow, as if it had been made just for him. Next came the matter of what Grandpa would wear. The family agreed that he should be dressed in his favorite suit, the navy blue one he wore only on special occasions. Margaret volunteered to retrieve it from his closet, along with a crisp white shirt and a tie adorned with tiny stripes. As she folded the clothes neatly into a bag, her hands trembled slightly. She couldn't help but think about how many times she'd seen him in that suit, standing proudly at weddings, graduations, and other milestones. Now, those same clothes would carry him to his final resting place. The undertaker handled the preparations with care, ensuring that every detail was perfect. He was a kind man in his 50s with gentle eyes and a calm demeanor that put the family at ease. When Robert handed him the suit and explained Grandpa's specific instructions, that no one was allowed to view the body before burial, the undertaker nodded solemnly. "I understand," he said. "We'll respect his wishes completely." Still, the request struck him as unusual. Over the years, he had prepared countless bodies for funerals, and while families often had unique requests, this level of secrecy was rare. Something about it lingered in the back of his mind, though. He didn't dwell on it too much. His job was to provide comfort and closure, not to pry into personal matters. Meanwhile, the rest of the family busied themselves with other arrangements. Flowers needed to be ordered, hymns chosen, and seating plans organized. Emily, the youngest granddaughter, found herself drawn to the attic where boxes of old photographs and mementos were stored. She hoped to find something meaningful to display during the service, a picture or keepsake that captured the essence of who Grandpa truly was. As she sifted through dusty albums and faded letters, memories flooded back. Summer afternoons spent fishing by the creek, evenings listening to his soft humming as he rocked in his chair, and the way he always seemed to know when someone needed a hug, even if they hadn't asked for one. Among the clutter, Emily stumbled upon a small wooden box tucked away in a corner. It was plain, with no markings or decorations, but something about it caught her attention. Carefully, she opened it to reveal a collection of items: a tarnished pocket watch, a bundle of letters tied with ribbon, and a faded photograph of a young woman holding a bouquet of wildflowers. The woman's face was unfamiliar, yet there was something hauntingly familiar about her smile. For a moment, Emily wondered if this was the same woman she'd seen in the earlier photograph, the one standing beside Grandpa in his younger days. Her heart raced as she clutched the box tightly, feeling as though she had uncovered another piece of the puzzle surrounding her grandfather's mysterious past. Back downstairs, conversations buzzed around the house as relatives gathered to discuss logistics. Some argued over which songs should be played during the service, while others reminisced about their favorite memories of Grandpa. There were laughs and tears, moments of joy intertwined with sorrow. Despite the heaviness of the occasion, there was also a sense of togetherness, a reminder that even in loss, family bonds remained strong. Still, beneath the surface, there was an unspoken curiosity about why Grandpa had forbidden anyone to see him before burial. Was it simply a matter of privacy, or did it hint at something deeper? As the day of the funeral drew nearer, the tension grew. People began arriving from out of town, filling the house with voices and laughter. Children ran through the halls, oblivious to the weight of the situation, while adults exchanged hugs and shared stories. Amidst the chaos, Emily kept thinking about the wooden box and its contents. Should she bring it up? Would anyone else care about these relics from Grandpa's past? She decided to keep it to herself for now, tucking the box safely under her bed until she could figure out what to do next. On the eve of the funeral, the family held a private gathering at the church. Candles flickered softly, casting shadows on the walls as they sang hymns and prayed together. It was a somber yet beautiful evening filled with both grief and gratitude. As the service came to an end, Robert stood up to speak. His voice cracked with emotion as he thanked everyone for coming and expressed how much Grandpa had meant to each of them. He spoke of his father's quiet strength, his unwavering love, and the lessons he had taught them, not through words, but through actions. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Afterward, as people filed out of the church, Emily lingered behind, staring at the altar. She thought about all the questions she still had about Grandpa. Who was the woman in the photograph? What secrets lay hidden in the letters? And why had he gone to such lengths to keep certain parts of his life private? The answers felt tantalizingly close, yet frustratingly out of reach. All she knew for sure was that tomorrow at the gravesite, they would finally say goodbye to the man who had shaped their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. That night, as the house grew quiet and the stars twinkled faintly, in the sky, Emily lay awake in bed, clutching the wooden box to her chest. Sleep eluded her as her mind raced with possibilities. Whatever truths Grandpa had taken with him to the grave, she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't entirely lost. Somewhere, somehow, the pieces of his story were waiting to be pieced together. And as dawn approached, bringing with it the promise of a new day, Emily resolved to uncover the mystery, not just for herself but for the entire family. Little did she know, the journey ahead would lead them all to a revelation far greater than anyone could have imagined. The morning of the funeral dawned gray and overcast, as if the sky itself was mourning the loss of Grandpa Henry. A light drizzle began to fall as family members and friends gathered at the cemetery, their umbrellas dotting the landscape like colorful blooms against the muted tones of the day. The air was thick with emotion, sadness, nostalgia, and a quiet sense of unity that comes from standing together in shared grief. Everyone had come to pay their respects, from distant relatives who hadn't seen Grandpa in years, to neighbors who remembered him fondly as the man who always lent a helping hand. Emily stood near the back of the crowd, clutching the wooden box she'd found in the attic. She hadn't told anyone about it yet, unsure of how or even if she should share its contents. The weight of the box felt heavier than ever, both literally and figuratively. It wasn't just an old container filled with trinkets. It was a portal to questions she couldn't answer and secrets she didn't fully understand. As she looked around at the sea of faces, she wondered if anyone else harbored similar curiosities about Grandpa's life. Did they, too, feel like there were pieces missing from the puzzle? The pallbearers moved slowly and deliberately, carrying the polished coffin toward the gravesite. Each step seemed to echo in the stillness, drawing everyone's attention. Emily's gaze lingered on the casket, her mind racing with thoughts. What lay inside? Was it simply Grandpa, dressed in his favorite suit, resting peacefully? Or was there something more, something he had left behind for them to discover? Her heart pounded as she recalled the note tucked inside the wooden box. For those who seek the truth. Could it be possible that Grandpa had planned this moment all along? As the coffin was lowered onto the stand above the open grave, Margaret stepped forward to say a few words. Her voice trembled as she spoke about Grandpa's kindness, his wisdom, and the quiet strength that had defined him. She recounted stories of how he had helped raise their children, taught them valuable lessons, and been a steady presence in their lives. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, broken only by the soft patter of raindrops hitting umbrellas. Then one by one others began sharing their own memories, laughter-filled anecdotes, heartfelt tributes, and expressions of gratitude for having known such a remarkable man. But just as the service seemed to be winding down, Emily felt a sudden urge to speak. She glanced at the wooden box in her hands, then at the faces of her family members. They were smiling through tears, nodding at each other, finding comfort in the shared stories. Yet Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something important was being left unsaid. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her movements hesitant but determined. I have something to share," she began, her voice barely audible over the rustling of leaves. Heads turned in her direction, eyebrows raised in curiosity. Emily swallowed hard, clutching the box tighter. "Before the funeral, I found this in the attic." She held it up for everyone to see. "Inside are some things that belong to Grandpa. Things I think might help us understand him better." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some leaned closer, intrigued, while others exchanged puzzled glances. Robert approached cautiously, his brow furrowed. "What kind of things?" he asked, his tone gentle but probing. Emily hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. Finally, she opened the box and carefully removed the items one by one. The tarnished pocket watch, the bundle of letters tied with ribbon, and the faded photograph of the mysterious woman. Gasps erupted from the crowd as people craned their necks to get a better look. Someone whispered, "Who is that?" Another voice chimed in, "Do you think it's her, the one from the other picture?" The photograph drew the most attention. It was clear that the woman in the photo meant something significant to Grandpa, though no one could quite place her identity. The letters, too, sparked curiosity. Their neatly written addresses hinted at correspondence spanning decades, though the names and locations were unfamiliar. And then there was the pocket watch, its surface scratched and worn, as if it had been handled countless times over the years. Each item seemed to carry a piece of Grandpa's story, waiting to be unraveled. Robert took the items from Emily, examining them closely. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as he read snippets of the letters aloud. One mentioned places none of them recognized, cities in Europe, dates from decades ago, and phrases that sounded almost coded. Another referenced someone named Claire, whose name appeared repeatedly throughout the correspondence. By the time Robert reached the final letter, his hands were trembling. This can't be right," he muttered, shaking his head. He looked at Emily, then at the rest of the family. "These aren't just random keepsakes. This is part of Grandpa's past. But why would he keep it hidden for so long?" The realization hung heavy in the air. For years, they had assumed they knew everything about Grandpa, that he was simply a farmer, a husband, a father, and a grandfather. But now, faced with these artifacts, it was clear that there was far more to him than anyone had ever imagined. The pieces didn't fit the image they had constructed in their minds, leaving them grappling with a mix of awe and bewilderment. Margaret broke the silence, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within her. "We need to know," she said firmly. "Whatever secret Grandpa kept, whatever truth he wanted us to find, it's here, and we owe it to him to uncover it." Her words struck a chord with everyone present. Slowly, heads began to nod in agreement. Even those who had initially dismissed the idea of prying into Grandpa's private life now seemed eager to learn more. After all, wasn't that what funerals were for? To celebrate a person's life, to remember who they were, not just the roles they played, but the entirety of their existence? It was then that Emily remembered the note she had discovered earlier, the one addressed specifically to her. She pulled it out of her pocket and unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was unmistakably Grandpa's, neat and precise, as if every word had been carefully chosen. Clearing her throat, she read it aloud. "To my dear Emily, if you truly wish to understand me, open my coffin. Inside you will find what I could not leave behind. Do not fear, for the truth will set us free." The effect was immediate. A collective gasp swept through the crowd, followed by murmurs of shock and disbelief. Open the coffin? No one had anticipated such a request. It went against tradition, against propriety, against everything they thought they knew about saying goodbye. Yet at the same time, it felt undeniably like something Grandpa would do. If anyone could defy convention in pursuit of truth, it was him. For several minutes, the family debated what to do. Some argued that opening the coffin would disrespect Grandpa's memory, while others insisted that following his instructions was the only way to honor him. Tensions ran high, with voices rising and falling like waves. In the end, it was Emily who cast the deciding vote. "We have to do it," she said, her voice firm despite the tears streaming down her face. "This isn't just about us. It's about Grandpa. He trusted us enough to leave this message. We owe it to him to see it through." Her determination swayed the group, and after a brief pause, they agreed to proceed. With careful deliberation, the pallbearers returned to the coffin, their movements slow and deliberate. As they prepared to lift the lid, the entire gathering fell silent, holding their breath in anticipation. Whatever awaited them inside, they knew, would change everything they thought they knew about the man they had loved and lost. The air grew heavier as the pallbearers approached the coffin once again. Everyone gathered around, their faces pale with a mix of anticipation and unease. It was one thing to speculate about Grandpa's mysterious past. It was another entirely to confront it in such an intimate and unexpected way. The thought of opening the coffin felt surreal, almost intrusive, yet no one could deny the magnetic pull of curiosity that had taken hold of them all. This wasn't just any moment. It was a threshold they were crossing into uncharted territory. Emily stood closest to the coffin, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain others could hear it. She clutched the note tightly in her hand, rereading its words for what felt like the 100th time. "If you truly wish to understand me, open my coffin." Her mind raced with questions. What did he mean by understand? Was there something inside that would finally explain the enigma of his life? Or was this some kind of test? A final lesson from a man who had always valued thoughtfulness over impulsiveness? As the lid began to creak open, the crowd leaned forward unconsciously, drawn by a shared sense of wonder and dread. The sound seemed louder than it should have been, echoing through the quiet cemetery like the groan of ancient wood waking from slumber. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe, as the first glimpse of what lay inside came into view. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Grandpa Henry rested peacefully within, dressed in his navy blue suit, his hands folded neatly across his chest. His expression was serene, almost content, as if he had simply fallen asleep. For a brief moment, relief washed over the family. Perhaps the note had been symbolic, a metaphorical nudge rather than a literal instruction. But then someone noticed something unusual tucked beneath his folded arms. Margaret gasped softly, pointing at the object with trembling fingers. Carefully, Robert reached down and lifted it free, holding it up for everyone to see. It was a leather-bound journal, its surface cracked and worn with age. The cover bore, Faint scorch marks as though it had survived fire or extreme wear. Embossed on the front in faded gold lettering were the words, "For those who seek the truth." The sight of the journal sent a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. People exchanged glances, their eyes wide with disbelief. Had Grandpa known this moment would come? Had he planned every detail, the note, the journal, even the forbidden request to open the coffin, all along? The weight of his foresight left them speechless. Here was proof that their grandfather, the quiet man who rarely spoke of his past, had carried secrets far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Robert hesitated before opening the journal, his hands shaking slightly. He turned to Emily, seeking guidance. After all, the note had been addressed specifically to her. Did she want him to read it aloud now in front of everyone? Or should they wait until later when emotions weren't running so high? Emily bit her lip, torn between caution and urgency. Finally, she nodded. "We need to know," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the patter of raindrops hitting umbrellas. "Let's do it." With that, Robert opened the journal to the first page. The handwriting was unmistakably Grandpa's, neat and precise, each letter carefully formed, as though he had poured hours of effort into ensuring clarity. The opening entry began with a simple sentence that sent chills down everyone's spines. "If you are reading this, then I am gone. But my story remains. Listen closely, for it is not mine alone." The next few pages detailed events that none of them could have predicted. According to the journal, Grandpa Henry hadn't always been the humble farmer they knew. In his youth, during World War II, he had served as a spy for the Allies. His mission had taken him deep into enemy territory, where he worked undercover in occupied France, smuggling intelligence to Allied forces while maintaining a false identity. The entries described harrowing escapes, close calls, and moments of sheer terror. One passage recounted how he had narrowly avoided capture after being followed by German soldiers. Another told of a daring midnight rendezvous in a forest clearing, where he handed off critical documents to a resistance fighter. As Robert continued reading aloud, the gravity of Grandpa's sacrifices became painfully clear. He hadn't just risked his life. He had given up pieces of himself. The journal revealed how he had fallen in love with a French woman named Claire, who had helped him navigate the treacherous landscape of war-torn Europe. Their relationship had been forbidden, fraught with danger at every turn. Yet despite the risks, they had found solace in each other, forming a bond that transcended language and circumstance. But when the war ended, Grandpa was forced to leave Claire behind, returning to his home country without so much as a proper goodbye. The pain of that separation haunted him for the rest of his life. The family listened in stunned silence, their hearts breaking for the man they had only ever known as Grandpa. Each revelation painted a picture of someone far more complex than the quiet patriarch who sat on the porch swing, humming softly to himself. They learned about medals he had earned but never claimed, letters he had burned to protect identities, and dreams he had abandoned to keep his secrets safe. The journal also contained sketches, quick pencil drawings of landscapes, faces, and moments frozen in time. Some depicted scenes of battle, while others showed tender exchanges between Grandpa and Claire. Together, these fragments wove a tapestry of courage, loss, and resilience. By the time Robert reached the final entry, tears streamed freely down nearly every face. The last page was dated shortly before Grandpa's death, written in shaky handwriting that suggested he had been weak or ill. It read, "I have lived a long life, but not without regret. I kept my silence because the truth was too heavy to bear, not just for me, but for those I loved. Now, as I prepare to leave this world, I entrust my story to you. Do not mourn what I lost, celebrate what I gained, for in serving others I found purpose, and in loving deeply I discovered meaning. Remember me not as a hero, but as a man who tried his best. That is enough." When Robert finished reading, the cemetery fell silent except for the soft patter of rain. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of Grandpa's words settled over them like a comforting blanket, wrapping them in both sorrow and understanding. They had spent years wondering about the man behind the mystery, and now, standing beside his grave, they finally understood. He hadn't hidden his past out of shame or fear. He had done it out of love. Love for his family, love for his country, and love for the woman he had left behind. Margaret was the first to break the silence. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but her words carried strength. "He gave us so much more than we realized," she said, looking around at the tear-streaked faces of her family. "And now it's our turn to honor him, to remember not just the grandfather we knew, but the man he truly was." One by one, people stepped forward to place flowers on the coffin. Each bloom represented a piece of Grandpa's legacy, a lifetime of sacrifice, bravery, and quiet devotion. As they stood, together under the gray sky, united by newfound knowledge and shared grief, they felt closer to him than ever before. The mystery that had once separated them had become the bridge that brought them together. And though the rain continued to fall, washing away footprints in the damp earth, the family knew they would carry Grandpa's story with them forever. Not as a burden, but as a gift, a reminder that even the quietest among us can hold the most extraordinary truths. The cemetery slowly emptied as the family made their way back to the house, the weight of Grandpa's journal heavy in their hearts and minds. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a damp freshness in the air that seemed to mirror the clarity they now felt about the man they had lost. Each step toward home was accompanied by whispers, murmurs, and occasional gasps as snippets of the journal replayed in their thoughts. For years, they had seen Grandpa Henry as a simple, unassuming figure, a farmer who lived quietly and loved deeply, but now he was something more, a hero, a survivor, and a man burdened by untold sacrifices. Back at the house, the atmosphere shifted. Gone were the formalities of the funeral service. Instead, the family gathered around the dining table, pulling chairs close together until the room buzzed with anticipation. The journal sat in the center, its worn leather cover glistening faintly from residual moisture. It looked almost alive, as if it carried Grandpa's spirit within its pages. Everyone wanted to dive deeper into its contents, but no one quite knew where to start. Should they read it page by page, skip ahead to specific entries, or simply sit in silence, letting the enormity of the discovery sink in? Emily, still clutching the wooden box she'd found in the attic, broke the tension. "We need to finish reading this," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "Not just for us, but for Grandpa. He trusted us with his story, and we owe it to him to hear it all." Her words struck a chord, and soon the family began passing the journal around, taking turns reading aloud. Each entry revealed another layer of Grandpa's life, moments of triumph, heartbreak, and resilience that painted a vivid picture of who he truly was. One passage described how he had once disguised himself as a traveling merchant to smuggle intelligence across enemy lines. Another recounted the night he narrowly escaped capture after being betrayed by someone he thought he could trust. The details were gripping, almost cinematic, yet they were grounded in the reality of war, a brutal, unforgiving world where every decision carried life or death consequences. But it wasn't just the danger that captivated them. Between the lines of espionage and survival, there were glimpses of humanity, small acts of kindness, fleeting moments of joy, and profound connections forged in the darkest of times. Claire's name appeared frequently, woven throughout the narrative like a golden thread. She wasn't just an accomplice or a love interest. She was his anchor, the person who reminded him why he fought so hard and risked so much. Letters addressed to her were tucked into the journal's pages, their words filled with longing and devotion. In one particularly poignant note, Grandpa wrote, "Claire, my dearest, I fear I may never see you again, but please know that your light has guided me through the shadows. You are my reason to keep going, my hope when all else seems lost. If I must leave you to save others, then so be it, but never doubt that my heart belongs to you always." The letters brought tears to everyone's eyes, especially Margaret's. As she held one of them delicately between her fingers, she couldn't help but wonder what had become of Claire. Had she survived the war? Did she ever remarry? Or did she spend the rest of her life waiting for a man who never returned? These questions lingered unanswered, adding a bittersweet edge to the revelations unfolding before them. As the hours passed, the family pieced together not only Grandpa's wartime experiences, but also the toll they had taken on him. One entry stood out, written decades after the war ended. In it, he confessed his lifelong guilt over leaving Claire behind and the difficulty he faced adjusting to civilian life. He spoke of nightmares that haunted him, memories that refused to fade, and a sense of isolation that followed him even amidst the warmth of family. Yet, despite these struggles, he expressed gratitude for the second chance he had been given, to build a new life, raise children, and create a legacy rooted in love and peace. He carried all of this alone, Robert murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. All these years we thought he was just quiet, but he was carrying a war inside him. The realization hit everyone like a wave. They had assumed Grandpa's silence stemmed from shyness or introversion, but now they understood it was something far deeper. His quiet demeanor wasn't a lack of things to say. It was a deliberate choice to shield them from the pain and complexity of his past. He had chosen to protect them, to let them grow up in a world untouched by the horrors he had endured, and, in doing so, he had sacrificed parts of himself, burying his truth beneath layers of stoicism and routine. As the evening wore on, the conversation shifted from shock and sadness to admiration and awe. Stories emerged about moments they had overlooked or misunderstood during Grandpa's lifetime. Emily recalled how he would sometimes disappear into the woods for hours, returning with dirt-streaked hands and a distant look in his eyes. At the time, she had thought he was simply exploring nature, but now she wondered if those solitary walks were his way of processing memories too painful to share. Another cousin remembered how Grandpa would hum the same tune over and over while working. In his garden, a melody none of them recognized. Could it have been a song from his days in France, a fragment of the life he left behind? These reflections sparked laughter as well as tears, creating a tapestry of emotion that bound the family closer together. They realized that Grandpa's influence extended far beyond the secrets he had kept. His values, patience, perseverance, and quiet strength, had shaped them in ways they were only beginning to understand. Even the smallest gestures, like the way he fixed broken toys or tended to his plants, carried echoes of the resilience he had demonstrated during the war. By the time midnight approached, exhaustion settled over the group, but no one wanted to stop reading. There was still so much to uncover, so many pieces of the puzzle waiting to be assembled. Finally, Margaret suggested they take a break, promising to continue the next day. Reluctantly, they agreed, setting the journal aside with reverence. As they dispersed to their respective rooms, each person carried a piece of Grandpa's story with them, turning it over in their minds like a precious gem. Emily stayed behind, unable to sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wooden box and its remaining contents. Beside the journal, pocket watch, and letters, lay the photograph of Claire, the woman who had captured Grandpa's heart and inspired his courage. Emily picked it up gently, studying the woman's face. Her smile was radiant, full of hope and determination, and her eyes seemed to hold a secret that transcended time. For a moment, Emily imagined what it must have been like to stand beside Grandpa, to share in his mission and his dreams. She felt a pang of envy, not for the hardships they endured, but for the depth of connection they had shared. Eventually, sleep claimed her, but her dreams were restless, filled with images of shadowy forests, flickering candles, and a young man in a suit whispering secrets to the wind. When she woke the next morning, the sun was streaming through the window, casting golden light across the room. The journal sat on the counter, waiting patiently for them to return to its pages. For the first time in days, Emily felt a glimmer of peace. The mystery that had loomed over Grandpa's life was no longer a source of confusion or frustration. It was a gift, a testament to the extraordinary man he had been. And though the journey to understanding him was far from over, she knew they were on the right path. Together they would honor his memory, not by dwelling on the secrets he had kept, but by celebrating the courage and love that defined him. As she joined the rest of the family for breakfast, the journal once again became the focal point of their gathering. Today, they would delve deeper into its contents, uncovering the final chapters of Grandpa's story. But already they could feel the shift within themselves. Their bond strengthened, their perspective widened, and their hearts forever changed by the man who had taught them that true strength lies not in words but in actions.